Hey everyone. Um, how are y'all doing? I hope y'all are feeling good. I'm doing good today. Um, got a little bit more rest. I'm feeling what the okay. Lights going out. If that's the worst that happens today, I think we'll be good considering what's happened in the past. So I'll live with it. I hope everyone's doing well. I hope everyone. I see everyone's already talking and having a good time. Excellent. So before we get started, um, I just want to give you all a heads up on a couple of things. I'm thinking we're going to do like a mission statement here. I'm working on it. I'm sculpting it. We're probably a couple of weeks away from really putting it out there, really praying about it, thinking about it, trying to see kind of where to go with it. Honestly, I want to make certain that we're, that we stay on target here and that we are doing the right things. I should probably put my phone on silent. There we are. That would be awkward. But I think what we're doing here is we're building a community. My first thoughts that is dedicated to truth, right? To a full exploration of truth. That I think everyone on this channel who's watching, um, you want to know the truth, you want to participate in the truth, and then you want to live the truth. I think that's sort of a big thing that has really what I've seen from what's going on is really what's needed the most right now. There's a lot of people having a lot of interesting discussions, but one of the things that I keep seeing, particularly amongst people who consider themselves leaders, um, like the national level, is that they're having trying to have these conversations and they're missing the points. And I think it's just gotten to serve that I think we've been so dedicated to the idea of having leadership that we're starting to see the failures of it. And don't get me wrong, there's always going to be leaders. There's always going to be people who riot. It's like, yeah, we kind of rally around ideas and people who can articulate them, and we should. There needs to be authorities. There need to be leaders, but we have abdicated so much to our leadership that we're like, okay, we'll fix everything. They can't fix it because they caused it. This is, really, if we're going to fix this, we all have to stand up here. This can't just be, okay, well, whoever the next Billy Graham is going to show up and he's going to fix everything and we'll all be cool. I don't think that's how this is going to play out, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's going to be shows like this, people like you. You're okay. I know the doobly doos are down here for you. It's over here for me. Um, but it's every one of us are going to have to stand up and do our part. I think if we really want to see change, it's got to come from us. We can't wait for a leader to make it happen or to tell us where to go. I think we all kind of know what we have to do. We have to love, just as Jesus did. Jesus told us what to do, but we got to do it. I think that's sort of the thing. We can't just, okay, the pastor is going to do it, or the eldership, or the deacons are going to do it, or here's this international, evangelist. He'll fix it. No, we got to do it. I don't think that when we die and we face our Creator, He's going to look at us and say, "So, how did Greg Laurie do today? While you were down there." I don't think He's going to care. I think He's going to ask, "What did you do?" So that's the thing. Is I think we need to step up, but we really need to be the ones to do it. We got to, and we can't abdicate our authority anymore. We can't abdicate our responsibility, right? We have a responsibility to do the truth and to live the truth. We can't just leave that up to somebody else. And so, like I said, just some clearinghouse things. Got some really good, interesting comments from last Sunday show. So we're going to talk about that a little bit on Sunday show. I do want to kind of keep them separate a little bit. Like I said, I want Thursday nights to be the Bible study. Sundays can be a little more loose, a little more topical. But so we're gonna kind of keep them separate. But just let y'all know if you had, because there are some great comments and I want to comment on. I'll comment on them there. Other than that, I think we're going to get started. We're actually going to do Revelation 6. I would like to save 7 for its own thing there. But before we get started, let's open in prayer, and let's see what's happening. We're finally to that point of revelation where things are starting to kick off. Obviously, there was a lot of meat there to sort of chew, but we're starting to get into the really complicated things, and it's just really good. It's going to be a really, really good study and interesting ride. So, but let's kick this puppy off with the prayer that we all need, me more than anything, and then we'll get started. Heavenly Father, we thank you and we praise you for all that you've done. Father, thank you for the people who are watching this both live and on the recorded session. Father, we know that you are working in the hearts and minds of all of us, and right now you are working in the world around us. You're making it clear that we can no longer stand idly by. We need to take responsibility. We have to live as you've called us, and we have to live out loud. We can no longer live in a world where we simply abdicate our responsibilities to someone else. There can't be the professional and lay and participant relationship. We all have to be the kings and priests that you've called us to be. And in that vein, we need to do the best to search you out ourselves. The ancient Israelites couldn't live on yesterday's manna. We cannot live on yesterday's teachings. We have to seek it out. Father, thank you for guiding us. Thank you for always being there, even if we can't see you. In Christ's name I pray. Amen. So before we go too far, just as a quick once over, we are coming to the opening of the seal, right? So we were able to do both chapter 4 and 5, which was the throne room in heaven. And now Jesus has come, and he's going to take this scroll that has these 7 seals. I have sort of played my hand a little bit. I do think that this book, this scroll that Jesus is opening now, or unsealing now, is the little book that John eats later on. I can't say that with ontological certitude. That's just an opinion I have for several reasons, but mostly because I think thematically, I think that's what's happening. Because as we notice, Jesus never reads from the book that we're aware of. It's never said. Now, people have argued. Let me put this down. That the 7 seals are Jesus breaks the seal, and then the prophet, and then the picture of the 4 horsemen and the martyrs and all that is what's written down on the scroll. But I don't think so, because the concept behind that is that the scroll has seals on the inside, and then as you unscroll it, every new chapter you break it, and that reveals it. I think, though, because I've gone so little behind the scenes honesty here. I'm a notary, amongst other things. So I've been a notary for a while, and to be honest, notarization is kind of a cool thing. It goes back for centuries. Well, the seals that were used, all throughout history, we have examples of these types of documents where they're sealed, and each signet ring, right, was a seal, and it indicated that was the person who had witnessed that document. So that's the precursor to the seals that we use today. And what's interesting is there are a number of ancient and medieval scrolls and documents that had numerous seals on them, but they were all on the outside, because that was sort of the whole point, right? You had to show that the seal was broken, and that the person who had sealed it, you could see the signet ring. You could say, okay, it's sealed. We're good. We don't have to worry about it. Putting the seals on the inside would prevent you from actually seeing the seals, and we know that that everyone can see that there were 7 seals, so it's on the out. So it's clearly on the outside. But more importantly than that, you wouldn't necessarily know that the person who had sealed it. The entire reason for the seal was to say, okay, that person had verified the document. That's the entire point of the seal. You use your signet ring. It's like, oh, okay, so Bob the king witnessed this, and this seal over here was done by George the king. Okay, cool, we're good. So the point of the seals were as a way of indicating authenticity of the document. So it'd have to be on the outside. Usually, something like this, you'd have the scroll, and then you would have these leather bands, and then clay or wax would be placed over it, and then the signet ring would make the impression, therefore authenticating the document. Now, what's interesting is if you go back a little further back, you have these seals that were done with these cylinders, right? And it was real big in Mesopotamia, and they would roll it into the clay, and that would make the seal again. And it wasn't a symbol like we usually think of it, right? In the mid ages, it was a symbol, like a coat of arms that you're like, oh, okay, I know who this is. In Mesopotamia, the cylinder seals were actually stories. They were events that would be known to someone or whatever, and that's you'd roll it out, and it's like, oh, look, there's one that people do believe is a representation of the Garden of Eden. There is a man and a woman and a tree. I think if I recall, there's a snake underneath. There's others where it's God's acting out a thing or whatever, but each seal was a story. I think that that's what this is. I think that this document is the book that John eats in chapter 10, 9 or 10, and that the seals, the person who sealed up this book was actually Daniel, as we pointed out last couple of times ago. The end of Daniel has the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation intersecting, right? And they're intersecting at the point where John eats the little book. It's the same event. And it intertwines the books, which is my entire thesis, is that Daniel and Revelation are actually the same book, just from two different perspectives. That if you understand Daniel, you can understand Revelation, because Daniel is sort of the cipher for Revelation, in that event at the end in chapter 12 of Daniel is Daniel looking at the event of like chapters 9, 10, and 12 with Daniel. So I think that it's actually Daniel he's commanded to seal up the book. I think those seals were placed there by Daniel, and very specifically, I think they're prophecies. Because if we read very carefully, and I'm going to read the chapter right now, what we see is it isn't that, as I mentioned earlier, Jesus doesn't read from the scroll. It's that a seal is broken, and then John sees an event, a thing. And so I think what's happening is Jesus is breaking the seal, and what John is seeing is the prophecy that was itself sealed up. So it's not the document itself, but rather the seals. But let's actually read the text, and then we can come back to it. Now let me try that one again. Now I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard one of the four living creatures saying with a voice like thunder, "Come and see." And I looked, and behold, a white horse. He who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer. When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature saying, "Come and see." Another horse, fiery red, went out, and it was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth, and that people should kill one another. And there was given to him a sword. It was given to him a great sword. Then verse 5. When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hands. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine." When he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and the name of him who sat on it was Death, and Hades followed with him. And the power was given to them over a fourth of the earth, to kill with the sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beasts of the earth. When he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who who had been slain for the word of God and for for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, "How long, O judge, and oh how long sorry, how long, O Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth?" Then a white robe was given to each of them. It was said to them that they should rest a little while longer, until both the number of their fellow servants and their brethren who would be killed as they were was completed. I looked when he opened the sixth seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became like blood, and the stars of heaven fell to the earth, and as a fig tree drops its late figs when it was shaken by a mighty wind. Then the sky receded as a scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved out of its place. And the kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, their commanders, the mighty men, every slave, every free man, hid themselves in the caves and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, "Fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath has come, and who is able to stand?" I'm going to stop right here because we're going to get into chapter 7. You know what? I'm going to read it because there's an important point to be made here. I'm just going to, you know what? We're going to do 6 and 7 today, but we'll probably have to talk more about 7 next week as well. So, chapter 7. After these things, I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, on the sea, or on any tree. Then I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God, and he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was granted to harm the earth and the sea, saying, "Do not harm the earth, the sea, or the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads." And I heard the number of those who were sealed. 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel were sealed. Of the tribe of Judah, there were 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Reuben, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Gad, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Asher, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Naphtali, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Manasseh, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Simeon, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Levi, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Issachar, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Zebulun, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Joseph, 12,000 were sealed. Of the tribe of Benjamin, 12,000 were sealed. Now after these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude which no one could number, of all nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes, with palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, saying, "Salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb." All the angels stood around the throne, and the elders and the 4 living creatures fell on their face before the throne and worshipped God, saying, "Amen. Blessing and glory and wisdom, thanksgiving and honor and power and might be to our God forever and ever." Then one of the elders answered, saying to me, "Who are these arrayed in white robes, and where did they come from?" And I said, "Sir, you know." So he said to me, "These are the ones who come out of the great tribulation, and washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore they are before the throne of God, and serve him day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne will dwell among them. They shall neither hunger any more nor thirst any more. The sun shall not strike them, nor any heat. For the Lamb who is in the midst of the throne will shepherd them and lead them to living fountains of waters. And God will wipe away every tear from their eye." Okay, let's stop right there because that gets into chapter 8, which is the 7th seal. So I'm going to start at the end, and then we're going to jump right back to the beginning. Chapter 8 begins the 7th seal. This is important. Everything between chapter 6, verse 12, and all of chapter 7 is the 6th seal. These are not Tighten up. I'm going to answer that question here in a second. I just kind of want to stop. I'm going to start at the beginning or the end, and I'm going to jump back to the beginning. Everything that we see from the breaking of the sixth seal, which is chapter 7 or chapter 6, 12, verse 12, through chapter 7 into up to 8, is one seal. It's not a seal, and then there's these other events that happen. This is all the sixth seal. And I'm going to answer your question by jumping back to the beginning of the seals. Because, well, let me explain a little bit about that, about what's happening here in that sixth seal. I think that actually kind of helps us retroactively decode a lot of what's happening in the other seals. So let's focus on this for a second. What happens? And what's funny is God kind of was talking to me there, for not audibly or anything, just he's showing me something. Because I'm glad I read that, because I made a connection here that I hadn't really in the past. So the sixth seal, and this is something I was already coming from, then I just saw it when I put it all together. So the sixth seal, there's a great earthquake, right? Then the sun becomes black as sackcloth, the moon becomes like blood, the stars fall to the earth. But they say this is the day of the wrath to come. The important thing that's happening here is this is the event that I did not put I didn't go through and mark it earlier. I apologize. It's going to take me a second to find Matthew 24. There we are. Right? Right? That's 24. Yeah, faithful servant, evil servant, coming as a man. Okay. So Matthew 24:29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from heaven, the powers of the heavens will be shaken, and then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven. And then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with great glory, with great power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heaven to the other. Let's go back. What happens? Sixth seal is opened. There's a great earthquake, which we'll talk. We know which one that is. That's in the seventh, or that's in the sixth trumpet. And the sun becomes. So again, what happens? Sun, moon, stars falling. And then the great day of his wrath has come. Why? Well, because the sky recedes like a scroll when it's rolled up, and every mountain island is moved. This is the same event. The sixth seal is Matthew 24:29 through 31. It's the same event. It's the same thing. It's the thing that happens before the day of the Lord. Well, here's what's interesting. So this earthquake, right? So if chapter, or if the sixth seal is Matthew 24 in that segment there, where's the earthquake? Because Jesus doesn't talk about this great earthquake. We'll skip ahead. I don't mind spoilers. Do y'all mind spoilers? I don't. Here we are. Now to women persecuted, seventh trumpet. Okay, here we are. So in the six witnesses, right, or we have in the epilogue of the witnesses, which is all in the sixth trumpet, the witnesses have been killed. They're dead for 3 days, right? So now we come to 11, 11, 11. Now after the 3.5 days, the breath of life from God entered them, and they stood on their feet, and great fear fell on those who saw them. Okay, just in case there's anyone who's not familiar with the story with Revelation, there were two witnesses. These are prophets. Some believe them, and we'll talk about them more. Some believe them to be Moses and Elijah. Others believe it to be Elijah and Enoch. Some believe them they're just prophets who were alive during that period. We'll talk about that more in depth. But they're prophets, and they prophesy. And then the Antichrist has them killed. They leave their body in the streets to celebrate, right? That these people had died, because they were sending plagues. They were preaching the truth about the Antichrist, about all the evil that was going on. but they were protected. They could spit. They could literally breathe fire, and they could call down plagues um, to defend them. But then eventually, the Antichrist kills them. They're dead for 3 days. Now they're coming back. People have been celebrating their deaths, and now they just stand up. And they heard a loud voice from heaven saying to them, "Come up here." And they ascended to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies saw them. In the same hour, there was a great earthquake, and a tenth of the city, which is Jerusalem, fell. In the earthquake, 7,000 people were killed, and the rest were afraid and gave glory to God of heaven. Second woe, the second woe is past. Behold, the third woe which is coming quickly. We'll talk about that more in a second. So that's the earthquake, right? Matthew 24 has the rest of it, but that earthquake, that great earthquake, is the earthquake that basically breaks up Jerusalem and kills 7,000 people. Why is it mentioned here? Because they're telling us when this occurs. This is the thing that so basically the sixth seal is everything from the witnesses, from the resurrection of the two witnesses onward. All of it. Chapter 7, when it talks about the sealing of the tribes of Judah. Well, what's going on? My argument is that these 12,000, or these 144,000 rather, these are not saved people. These are, we find out later that they are Jewish and that they're virgins and they're males, and that they're a what's called the idea is that they're first fruits, right? So let's talk about the concept of first fruits in the Old Testament. There was a feast of first fruits. So basically, when the harvest was first ripe, the priest would go out and collect a handful or a bundle of the first of these first ripe grains as a presentation or a wave offering to God. The idea is that it was the best. It was the first of the entire field to be harvested, right? So, in the same way, because when Jesus returns, this is a return of the king of the throne of David. Jesus rules from the throne of David in Jerusalem. That's what had been prophesied to the Jews. That's him as the reigning Messiah, or king, the coming of the kingship that they had expected when Jesus first showed up, right? So that those 12,000 that are marked, or the 144,000 that are marked, they are basically the first fruits. They're that first collection before he returns and does the job of actually harvesting the earth. So I think that's who they are. Some people have argued that they're evangelists and that they're going to prophesy throughout the whole of the tribulational period. But I would argue this is all the sixth seal. Six seals from that great earthquake forward. So I think what's happened is they've been resurrected. There's the earthquake, and we're having these events happen. Right, the sun is darkened, the moon turns to blood. Jesus is opening up the heavens, and people are seeing the coming sign of men. As I mentioned very early on, I think that we have just a couple weeks between the rapture, what we call the rapture of the resurrection, and the coming of Jesus. I think they're essentially the same event, just broken up over times, coinciding with the feast days. So these 144,000 are marked, and they're being preserved to follow Jesus around. Basically, they're his courtiers during the millennial kingdom. I think that's what we're seeing here. Again, I won't necessarily break. This is not something to break fellowship over. That's just my personal thought. Y'all can explore it yourselves. But let's continue with that sixth seal. What else happened? So that's who the 144,000 are. But then there's this giant multitude, right? All nations, tribes, peoples, tongues, and they're standing before God. And it's interesting. It says so one of the elders asks John who they are, which means, okay, so I do this with my children. I think we all have, if you have kids. It's like, why is that happening? And of course, John's response is, you know what's going on, right? It's like the elder's giving him a chance to kind of figure it out for himself. And John's like, and so the elder tells him, right? And who are these people? They are the ones who come out of the great tribulation and have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. These are Christians, but these aren't just Christians in general. These are Christians from the tribulation itself. So again, this is what I would argue is, again, further evidence for the rapture and the resurrection being the exact same thing, right? These people came out of the tribulation. Well, they couldn't have been raptured earlier, right? Then they wouldn't come out of the tribulation. They came out of it. That means they were there. He's during the resurrection. We have the rapture and resurrection are the same thing, and that's who these people are. And I think this is a huge, like I said, it's just no one can count them. So I think that's something that we need to remember is that the time of the end. We always focus on the evils, right? We focus on these weird things that are going on, seas turning to blood, the mark of the beast, people being beheaded. We focus on that, but we forget often that this is the end of evil. This is the end for 1,000 years. We'll talk about that later. But this is the end of our current struggle. Like right now, we're watching the fruits of all the chaos and the evil in our world. This is the end of all that. Jesus is coming. He's going to fix everything. We won't have to worry about corrupt politicians. We won't have to worry about these things. It doesn't mean everything is 100% easy, but it's fixable. He's coming to fix it. And in these struggles, in these trials, there's going to be, I believe, a billion soul harvest. I think we're walking into that now. I do believe that we're coming into a period that's why the fields are white for harvest. We need to be out there doing our thing. We can't just be in churches, whether it's a home church or a big church or whatever. You can't just keep it in the pew. You have to be in the world because there's a billion souls waiting to be harvested, maybe more. Maybe it's a 2 billion soul harvest. I don't know. But this right here is telling us more than anyone can count. That's going to need that's all hands on deck, right? When your mom came home with groceries and the car was full, it's like everyone would go out there and they bring them in and you put all the food up. Well, everyone had to do it. Why? Because there was just too much to do. That's where we are right now. There's too much to do. We all need to be out there doing the living the life of Christ to the world, so we can help bring in that harvest, so we can do what we're supposed to do. It's all hands on deck here. And this is the prophecy of this. We know that what we're doing is not in vain, because there will be that harvest. There will be this innumerable multitude and they're waiting for us. They're waiting for us. It's a done deal. It's already here. John saw it. We get to be a part of that. This is the greatest time ever. Forget the demons coming from the sky and the angels reappearing and the Antichrist and all of it. Who cares? We get to be a part of the greatest harvest of souls ever. We're part of that. Yeah, it's gonna be ugly. Well, guess what? World War II was ugly. And that was just man liberating man. This is Jesus in you liberating the souls of people forever. This is a one and done kind of a thing. People stormed a beach in Normandy, faced machine gun fire at the possibility of freeing Europe for people who were going to live and then die and move on. Like it was all a very temporary thing. We have the same opportunity, only it's for something that's eternal, not temporary. These people will go on and live forever because of what we do, because we will follow the Holy Spirit. Again, the Holy Spirit is working through us so that He can work. Again, nothing we do is of ourselves. Okay, I'm going to derail here for a second. Y'all knew what you were signing up for. I derail. I've mentioned this before, and I will always say it. I think the reason we throw down our crowns, just as the elders did, right? As we read, last time, the elders threw down their crowns. I think because we know we do it too. Why? Because we'll understand the truth. Those crowns represent everything that we ever did that was good. As we'll find out, our lives are basically at some point put in front of us, right? And it's burned. And whatever that is of value, stays as gold and rubies and things like that. It's all metaphorical. I think that's what becomes your crown. But then we throw it and cast it at the feet of Jesus. Why? Because we understand that everything that we've ever done that's of any real value was God working through us. It wasn't of us. We're small. We're petty. We're selfish. We're easily angered. We don't even properly comprehend things half the time. We get caught up in small, petty arguments. But everything that's worth doing, which are the souls of men and women, obviously, everything that we do that's of real value is God acting through us when we allow Him to do it. We have to be willing participants. I know there's sometimes but it's way complicated. We'll talk about that. We're going to talk about it more. I think there's more to explore there, but the scripture makes it clear we do have to participate. We have to be willing participants. Because if you're not a willing participant, then you're the other kind. That's not pretty. We're all going to honor God. The question is, do you do it willingly, or do they have to knock you down and be like, okay, I get it? So my point, but the broader point is, this is evidence of what's coming, right? We get to participate in the greatest event the prophets begged to see this day. We get to be a part of it. This is awesome. So, what do we have? So, if all of chapter 7 and is that sixth seal, right? Then what we have is more than one. This is not a singular year, right? This is a shorter period of time, but it's a specific period of time. So let's take another look back. What's the first seal? It's this quote-unquote conqueror. Now, we see back in Zechariah, and we'll probably talk about this more on another episode as well, we see very similar spirits in Zechariah, right? So here's the thing. There's spirits. And I think you know what? I'll just go ahead and read it. It's probably just easier. We got time. So while I'm looking it up, let me point one thing out. There are probably as many theories as to who the first four seals are. The four horsemen of the apocalypse, as they're called, right? And there's probably as many theories as to who these writers are and what they symbolize as there are theologians, right? Nobody agrees on this, which I find interesting because there's usually only 2 or 3 camps for most things, but like for these spirits, man, it's all over the place. And I don't know that I found any one answer or theory that works for me. Hold on. I think there's a bunch of different things that these could be, and it may be that there's multiple things happening here. I don't know. We're going to read Zechariah and we'll come back to it, but just to show you how diverse the opinions are, let's look at the white horse, right? Some people will say that's the Antichrist. Others will say that was Jesus himself. Others will say it's Charlemagne creating the Holy Roman Empire. Others will say it's actually the Roman Church when, I forget which pope it was given a crown and it became more of a political authority. So literally we have the Antichrist, Jesus, the Holy Roman Empire, and then just the Roman Catholic Church. That's kind of a big gap there. Like, there's no consistency there. So let's jump back to Zechariah, and I think this will help sort of explain where I'm coming from. On the 24th day of the 11th month, which is the month of Shabbat, or the month Shebat, in the second year of Darius, the word of the Lord came to Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, the son of Iddo, the prophet, I saw by night, and behold, a man riding on a red horse, and it stood among the myrtle trees in the hollow, and behind him were horses, red, sorrel, and white. Something so sorrel is sort of like a spotted. Some people think it could be a reference to the pale horse that's mentioned earlier, but sorrel is sort of a patchy thing. Um, then I said, "My Lord, what are these?" So the angel who talked with me said, "I will show you what they are." And the man who stood among the myrtle trees answered and said, "These are the ones whom the Lord has sent to walk to and fro throughout the earth." So they answered so they answered the angel of the Lord who stood among the myrtle trees and said, "We have walked to and fro throughout the earth, and behold, all the earth is resting quietly." Then the angel of the Lord answered and said, "O Lord of hosts, how long will you not have mercy on Jerusalem and on the cities of Judah, against which you were angry these 70 years?" And the Lord answered the angel and talked to me with good and comforting words. So the angel who spoke with me said to me, "Proclaim, saying, Thus say the Lord, Lord of hosts, I am zealous for Jerusalem and for Zion with great zeal. I am exceedingly angry with the nations at ease. For I was a little angry, and they helped, but with evil intent. Therefore, thus says the Lord, I am returning to Jerusalem with mercy. My house shall be built in it, says the Lord of hosts, and a surveyor's line shall be stretched out over Jerusalem. Again, proclaim, saying, Thus says the Lord of hosts, my city shall again spread out through prosperity. The Lord will again comfort Zion and will again choose Jerusalem. Then I raised my eyes and looked, and there were four horns. And I said to the angel who talked with me, "What are these?" So he answered to me, "These are the horns that have shattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem." Then the Lord showed me four craftsmen, and I said, What are these coming to do?" So he said, "They are the horns that scattered Judah, so that no one could lift up his head. But the craftsmen are coming to terrify them, to cast out the horns of the nations that lifted up their horn against the land of Judah to scatter it." Then I raised my eyes and looked, and behold, a man with a measuring line in his hand. So I said, "Where are you going?" And he said to me, "To measure Jerusalem, to see what is its width and what is its length." And there was the angel who talked with me going out, and another angel was going out to meet him, who said to him, "Run, speak to this young man, saying, Jerusalem shall be inhabited as towns without walls, because of the multitude of men and livestock in it. For I, says the Lord, will be a wall of fire all around her, and I will be the glory in her midst." So there's a lot going on here, but it's easy to stop at the horses, right? But there's more going on here, because what's happening in the context of this is it's been 70 years and everyone's coming back, right? So God is he's coming. So it's been 70 years they in diaspora in Babylon, and God is going to return the Jews to Jerusalem. And so that's the context of this. But if we look, there's a lot of that same imagery that we see later on in Revelation. For example, amongst the trumpets, right? Let's go back to Revelation. Might need a little book. Chapter 11. Then I, John, was given a reed like a measuring rod, and the angel stood, saying, "Rise and measure the temple of God, the altar, and those who worship there. But leave out the court, which is outside the temple, and do not measure it, for it has been given to the Gentiles." So again, what we see, so we're seeing a lot of these same repetitions. So the writers in Zechariah were the ones who go about the earth, right? They're just checking everything out, right? But then we see a very similar set of colors and concepts in these seals, right? These sealed prophecies. So to connect them to spirits, I think is legitimate. But then we look at, like, say, the fifth, the fourth seal, which is the fourth horseman, right? What is he doing? He's just death, and Hades follows him. Like, that's it. Like, and so here's an interesting point, though, right? Where it says, they were killed by, a fourth of the earth to kill with the sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beasts of the earth. That beast of the earth, right? Beasts, plural, of the earth. The word there that we translate as beast, actually, or beast, is a little weird. It's almost described. I triple checked a bunch of different places on this one, and it's basically, the word means almost like a human animal. Like, it's almost like a monster, more than just, oh, hey, cats are going to turn against you, right? Or like cows are going to be stomping on people and eating them. Never trust a cow. That's just, never do it. But it's almost as if it's like, these are not normal animals that's described here. And I can't help but wonder if, so one theory is that these riders represent political movements or spirits, right? That the white is the Catholic Church, the red is communism, black is capitalism, and then this pale horse is, which can also, that same word that's we render as pale can also be rendered as green, and that the green is Islam, because as we'll discuss later, I do think that the Antichrist is going to come out of Islam. I don't think the Islam that we would see, though, is what is seen now. But we'll talk about that more later on. I don't know that I'd buy that either. I think there's something else larger going on. I think these are spirits. The question is what they represent. Like I said, there's a lot of different theories on this. So much so, I'm not satisfied by any one answer. But I'm intrigued by the fourth beast, or by the fourth horseman, because of the word that's used as far as what's killing people. As we'll see, the Antichrist and his kingdom are called the beast of the earth, or there's the beast of the sea, rather. Then there's a beast of the earth, which is the false prophet, right? As we went, weeks ago, we point out beasts. A prophetic beast are systems, right? They are empires. They are kingdoms. They are systems of authority and control. And that the horns are the rulers of that kingdom, right? A head will symbolize either a very specific king or a kingdom within that system. And the horns are absolutely the individual ruler. So I cannot help but wonder if these beasts of the earth is not actually the beast of the earth that we see later on. Because here's why, right? When we're talking about the beasts of the earth later on, let me jump ahead to it. Those are the seal, those are the trumpet. There we are. All right, the beast of the earth. Then I saw another beast. This is 13:11. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and spoke like a dragon. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast, which is the beast of the sea, which is the Antichrist, in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. He performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in sight of men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast, who was wounded by the sword and lived. And he was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. And then it talks, and of course, then he gets, I'll just go ahead and read it. So again, let's point out that it's the beast of the earth who has those who will not worship the first beast or the Antichrist to be executed. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their hand, on their right hand, or on their forehead, and that no man may buy or sell except one who has the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. So it's the beast of the earth who's given power and authority to execute those who don't worship the Antichrist. And then we have this fourth rider, and he's killing everyone with So the traditional view of the four horsemen is that the first one is, it's pestilence, it's famine, it's all these things, right? Because the third seal is supposed to be scarcity on the earth. Well, it's famine, and then we have war. But the thing is, it's the fourth, and everyone points to the fourth seal and says, well, clearly that's what's happening, because they kill with the sword. That's the red horse, and with hunger, that's the third horse. With death, and by beasts, and then by death, well, that's the fourth rider. So it's pestilence, war, and famine, and then just death. But it says, and power was given to them over fourth of the earth. Well, by them, I don't think it's meaning the other three. It's meaning just death and Hades. That's who he's talking to. That's the them. It's the two, because it's not just the fourth rider. Hades is with him. He's got another horse. There's actually 5 horsemen. Hades and death, they had the power, right? So I think there's something more. I think it's more complicated than we want it to be something simple, and I don't think it is. I think these are complicated. Like I said, I don't have an answer here, but I find it so, like, the idea that the black represents capitalism, because what do they have, right? They have scales. Well, that's merchants, right? Hey, Kathleen. It's scales, right? That's commerce, and it talks about the cost of grains, and it says, but hurt not the oil and the wine. Well, let's be honest. What is the number one thing for our economy? That's oil, right? Capitalism requires oil because it powers everything. And the olive oil is what is referenced there, but the olive oil of that day was medicine, it was food, but it was your lamp, right? It was used for everything. Well, we use oil for everything. Oil is actually the base for a lot of our medicines. It empowers our vehicles, that allows us to eat. It is obviously, it lights our homes oftentimes. It is, we use it for everything. We use, its distillates are used in hair products and literally we use oil for everything. Petrol is the olive oil of 2,000 years ago. Is it definitive? No, but I can't help but make that connection. And yet at the same time, I'm tempted. So I don't know necessarily that I don't believe that each seal. So let me go back to the question earlier. I don't think that each seal represents 1 year. I don't think it's that simple. I think that each one is a prophecy of a thing. I do tend to think that maybe the idea of these things being systems or spirits over a system, probably is a better way of saying it, that I believe. I think that's exactly what's happening here. But what does each one represent? I'm not 100% here. I don't know. I don't know that I just don't know that there's a solid answer for me. But let me answer a couple of questions, and we'll finish off since we started with the 6th, we'll finish off with the 5th, right? Oh, hold on. I didn't go far enough up. Mr. D Knuckle and Tighten Up are having a conversation. I love it. So yeah, I don't think that these seals are like, say, 1 per year. I think that these may even, honestly, if it really is like if that first one is like, say, the system of the Antichrist, it could go back a few years. But if it is like, say, the Holy Roman Catholic Church, that could go. That's going back over 1,000 years, right? These are These may just be systems. So I don't, like I said, I'm not real pleased with any one answer for these. But but if we look at the fifth seal, which is the martyrs, right? The fifth seal is this prophecy about martyrs, and it's that they're there, they're crying out for justice, and they're told, it's like, hold on, just wait, because there's more martyrs coming. Well, where are those martyrs coming from? They're coming from the tribulation, right? They're coming from that time period where everyone's dying, which is the fourth, that's the fourth rider, fourth and fifth rider, fourth seal. So that's why it's another connection that I think that these beasts of the earth that's referenced there is actually maybe those are the servants of the beast of the earth, right? The beast of the earth is this religious system that has two horns, so it has two rulers. I don't think one of them is the Antichrist. I think what we have is the false prophet, and then we have his second in command, which honestly may be the Pope who's alive at that time. I'm not, again, not 100% sold, but I'm not unconvinced of that either. But I think that there's still that connection. So I think that when it talks about the beasts of the earth, because it's plural, I don't think it's necessarily referring to just random animals. I think because the word there sort of has this indication of humanity built into these animals. So I think they may be the servants of the beast of the earth. So it's entirely possible. Again, I think that a lot. So let me again play my hand here. I think most of the trumpets actually are blown before the 7 years actually fire off. I think some of the trumpets may, not saying they have, but may have already been blown. Just a few of them, but I think they have. And it's those last three that are fired off during the 7 years. I think that either it's the fifth one, and then we get into the final 7 years, or it's the fifth trumpet is blown during the 7 years. That's in the first 3.5. But I do think that the event that we know that the trumpet, there's a trumpet that kills 1/3 of of mankind. I think it is entirely possible it's that chaos that is what causes the Antichrist to rise. And that's a separate event from the fourth. Like a quarter of the earth is killed. So it's like we have two different numbers. I think it's the chaos, the death, right? That's happening. Now the Antichrist rises. Now we have then a fourth of that population is killed, right? So that's sort of my little way of, again, that's my bet. I don't know that I'm 100% connected to, but I think the fourth rider is death. It's the mass death that occurs. But then we have these other things in the beast of the earth that kills the 1/4. So I think there's a lot going on, right? There's a lot that's happening those first, and maybe it's those first three that are taking up what we discussed during the trumpets. Because as we noticed, and as we've talked about prior, each section, the seals, the trumpets, they're different concepts, right? The seals are prophecies. John is looking at these different prophetic events. And then we get into the trumpets, and they are their own separate prophetic events. So I don't know that there isn't more overlap than we assume. I think it's assumed that these are separate things and they happen sequentially. I do believe that they're more overlapping, and there's way more interplay here than we assume often. And that's why, like I said, that's why that it's just there's the beasts of the earth, and then it's right before the martyrs. I can't help but think that there's an intertwining there, and the fact that we call the false prophet in his system the beast of the earth, there's not a coincidence there to me. I think we're connecting those, and I think we have to. But again, that's my reading of the situation. It doesn't have to be yours. We need this is something we need to study out, right? We need to read into it ourselves. We need to study out ourselves. We need to be open to new ideas and see which ones actually fit the best. Like I said, right now I'm not happy with any of them. Not 100% happy with them. Let me rephrase that. Because there may just be multiple things going on, and that's how it plays out. Like I said, we're going to get into the trumpets next time. And like I said, just as the seals are specific prophecies that John is seeing, I believe the trumpets are specific prophetic events to let us know, right? Um, that it's that those are the events to tell us what's coming. And Kathleen, I'm actually going to answer your question in 2 seconds because that's an interesting point. I'm glad you made it. So what I mean is, the seals are the bigger prophecies, right? Those are the things, but the trumpets are prophetic events to tell us what's coming. So what were trumpets used for? They were used to proclaim the coming of the king. They were used to a certain trumpet would make a certain blast, and if you were in the military, you'd be like, okay, I need to go over here and do this. I think that both are happening. I think that those events we're supposed to look and say, oh, that's what's happening here. This is where we are. The king is coming, and from a military perspective, we as the church need to wake up and do what we need to do because he's coming. So we need to make these movements. So, like I said, I'm of the opinion that it is entirely possible that at least the first three trumpets have blown, maybe four, but we'll talk about those next week. To Kathleen's question, right? Um, so yeah, let me just put it up on so everyone can see it because people who are watching later may not. You'll see it, right? So Jason, since the Bible is surrounded on the middle of okay, so basically the entire question is, since it's the Bible was written by people who live in the Middle East, right? Is it possible that the third population that was actually killed by ISIS, right? Um, I can't say that's a no. I think one of the things we often forget, again, this goes back to the conversation we had on Sunday. Sorry about that. Throat's getting a little dry. A lot of talking here. They had different. When we say the Earth or we say the world, we are thinking our globe, which Godzilla proved was a globe. Just saying. When we say the Earth, we mean our one specific ball of rock around our one star in our one solar system in our one galaxy, on and on and on, right? But there were differing concepts of world. For example, as we see going back to Daniel, right? When he stands before Nebuchadnezzar, he calls Nebuchadnezzar the ruler of the world. Now, let's be real precise here. I don't think the Chinese were worried about whether or not Nebuchadnezzar had a bad day. I don't think the Mayans were like, dude, is he in a bad mood? What's going on? They didn't even know he existed. Do you think the Celts cared about Nebuchadnezzar, or what about the people living in South Africa? He didn't rule the entire world. So why does Daniel say that he does? Because that word for them just meant if Jerusalem's here, the world is everything around it. That's it. That's all they meant, right? It's like, hey, you're the ruler of this sort of known world. It's not like they didn't know there was more to the earth. They just said, but they recognized that he was the ruler of their little world, right? Our world is a lot bigger because we have airplanes and boats and cars and satellites, and they had a horse and a camel. You had to walk everywhere. That's a small world. Great example of this is just north of here, Cedar Hill, right? Highest point in North Texas. There's it's called Mount Lebanon, right? It's the mountain. They called it a mountain, the people who settled it. And I think and it's because from one perspective, it's a really tall hill. It's not really a mountain, but it's the tallest point you can see for hundreds of miles, really. Again, it's the highest point in North Texas. But it's also, we looks like that's not a mountain. It's barely a hill. It's basically just a raised part of Earth with a drop off. But I would imagine you'd have a very different opinion if you had to walk it. Right? Kind of the same idea. So I can't help but wonder when it talks about a third of the world, right? Or when in the first trumpet it talks about how all the grass is burned up and a third of the trees were burned up. We imagine all of the grass all over the planet to be burned, and 1/3 of all the trees to have been destroyed. But what if that's not the case? What if it's 1/3 of the trees in that world, right? In that grouping, right? That world system. What if it's 1/3 of the people living in just this area, right? That's the world. What if it's not the entire planet? I can't say no to that. I think we do need to take their understanding of the world into account. No pun intended. I think it is entirely possible that, because we always wonder, like, how could people live during the tribulation and know that this was a thing and be like, yep, no connection whatsoever. We're going to talk about that more, because when we get to the Antichrist, we have a lot to talk about, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But I also think it's because we have one view of it, and the reality is very different. We read when Mark Twain visited the Middle East, right? He discussed how he's like, you go and you see the places that the Bible talks about, and it's like, it's just not what the imagination imagines it to be. And I think that's a key point here. We bring our sensibilities, our aesthetics, our preconceived notions to the Bible often. So when we see people talk, when we're reading about the glory of Jerusalem and all the, we're imagining it from our point of view and not their point of view. Don't get me wrong; these all things were probably amazing, but I mean, we'd look at them and be like, I mean, it's quaint, right? I mean, it's we often have we put our preconceptions and our worldview on top of the Bible, and we expect it to work that way instead of going back and saying, well, what did they mean, right? And then extrapolating from that. That's important. Like when we get to 666 or the 616:6, however you want to say it, there's a lot there, and I think there's a lot that's often missed. For example, like I said, we just talked about it. There's three. There's not one. There's three marks. When was the last time you heard anyone talk about that? That's why you come here. Not just because I'm highly attractive, but it helps. So I think we need to remember that we have to remember it from their perspective first. That's going to even help us when we get to the Whore of Babylon. That's going to help us identify who it's really talking about. Because again, spoilers, it's not Rome, but we have to have their mindset to understand what's being said. So yes, to your point, Kathleen, it is entirely possible um, that when it talks about the third, it may be regional. That the number is there. Titan, yes. The descriptions of the bear, lion, leopard, and ram, eagle would indicate that. Yes, from Daniel 7. The world stage is so. Let me take a step back. Yes, the entire world stage is going to be involved because we can talk more about it once we get further in. Once we come to the chimera that is the Antichrist system, we'll go over it again. But just if you go back to Daniel 7, there's a lion that's great for me. That's Great Britain. I think that's Great Britain. The bear is Russia. The four-headed leopard is, in my opinion, is a rebuilt Islamic empire that is basically all the old Alexandrian empires. That's North Africa. That's the Middle East, including Israel, all the way to which includes Iran, all the way over to India. Those are the old Islamic. That's the old Islamic Caliphate. That's the old Alexandrian Empire, and that's where I think the leopard is. So I do think we are talking. Don't get me wrong. We are absolutely talking about the whole world, but the numbers when it says 1/3, I don't know that we can say it's 1/3 of the entire planet or 1/3 of a particular region. I don't know that we have a definitive answer. However, I do think that a lot of these things are worldwide, right? I think these things are bigger than people realize. Because when it talks about the army that kills 1/3, I tend to think that is 1/3 of the earth, personally. But my thing is the quarter, right? So let me make sure we're not conflating things. I think when it says one third of mankind was killed, I think it means one third of mankind. But that quarter, right? It talks about a quarter of the people were killed. I think that's a quarter of the third of the two thirds that were left over, but it may be a third or one quarter of those living under the Antichrist system. And I think it's entirely possible that not everyone is under the. I think it's clear not everyone's under the Antichrist system in the way that we think it is. Um, yeah. So okay, we'll get into it right now. We'll come back to it a little bit further. So let me read Daniel chapter 7 so we can all get some context, right? Because we're sort of hinting about it. Let's just go ahead and read it, and then we'll call it a day real quick. See what happens. We get to talking and get to flipping more pages. 10, 12, which we've already read. 10, 7. Here we are. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head while on his bed. Then he wrote down the dream, telling the main facts. Daniel spoke, saying, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heaven were stirring up the great sea, and four great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I watched till the wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And suddenly another beast, a second, like a bear. It was raised up on one side and had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And they said thus to it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I looked, and there was another, like a leopard, with which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring and breaking in pieces and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little horn, coming up from among them, before whom 3 of the horns were plucked out by the roots. And there in this horn were eyes in the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words. I watched till the thrones were put in place, and the Ancient of Days was seated. His garment was white as snow, his hair, the head of his head was like pure wool. His throne was a fiery flame, its wheels a burning fire. A fiery stream issued, and a fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. 1,000 thousands ministered to him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were opened. I watched then because of the sound of the pompous words which the horn was speaking. I watched till the beast was slain, and its body destroyed and given to the burning flame. As for the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. I was watching in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. By the way, they can also be translated as a Son of Man. We'll talk about that later. He came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. Then to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom the one which shall not be destroyed. So, hold on. Yeah, I'm going to keep reading here. We'll save this for another day. So, because they tell us who these things are. That these the 4 beasts are 4 kings and they're great beasts and kingdoms that'll come and rise out of the earth. They're the saints. The Most High will receive the kingdom. That's that's Jesus. So here's the thing, right? I know traditionally people have seen you know, people said, well, it must be like Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Babylon, and then the fourth one is Rome, right? That's the usual translation. The reason I personally don't hold to it, or let me rephrase this, it I think that we're seeing two different things here. I think it's entirely possible that that was the case until Jesus came, and then it repeats, right? I think we one thing we have to keep in mind is prophecy is written for his first coming and then his second coming. Since the context of these nations are the second coming, we have to remember that the first three beasts, the lion that had the eagle's wings removed, the four-headed leopard, and the bear, have to be alive during the Antichrist kingdom, right? They have to be alive during the Antichrist kingdom, and then they have to be alive after the Antichrist kingdom during the reign of Christ. While Egypt still exists, Babylon doesn't. Babylon can't exist anymore, right? So we can't have Babylon. And ancient Greece was actually was had actually consumed Babylon, so it can't be ancient Greece. So these these three kingdoms have to exist during that reign, and they have to exist after. So when it comes to the lion, right? It has eagle's wings, and it is now again not all designations mean something, but okay, I just lost it anyway. But the part that talks about the eagle's wings being removed and lion, that's Daniel chapter 7 verse 4. July 4th. Our symbol is the eagle. The symbol for Great Britain is the lion. And by the way, hold on. I don't have time to do it. I'll do it for next time. The flag in the Royal Court of Arms for England is a lion that's standing on its hind legs. And after our revolution, what happened? The monarchy still exists, kind of, sort of, but I mean, it's run by a prime minister. Like the royals are just sort of figureheads. So it was changed. The power of the monarchy absolutely was lost after our revolution, after the wings were removed. The bear. Is there a system that has a bear as a symbol? Yeah, it's Russia, like the Russian bear. Like, this has been around forever. However, look at the party that is run by its current ruler, Putin. Right? Putin basically just took over the country. His party is literally a bear. Like, that's his symbol. Like, we have Republicans who are the elephant, and Democrats are donkeys. For him, the symbol of his party is a bear. And it's kind of on the nose. The four-headed leopard, my opinion, what that is, because remember, Greece, after Alexander died, his empire broke into four kingdoms, right? Well, but it's one body with four heads. What that means is the bodies are the contiguous land masses that the nations take over, right? It's not just the political area, it's the actual area that they combine. The four heads are on one body, so it's now one reunified kingdom. And I think what we're seeing is the rebirth as this. What we're seeing is the recombination of the Islamic empires right now. Does it look like it? But that's what's going to end up happening. All of the old Alexandrian empires, right? North Africa, the Middle East, all the way into Iran, which includes classic Greece, which is Turkey, right? What we think of as Greece are the Aegeans, but Greece was basically, all of Turkey. So those are going to recombine into one empire. And that's why it says dominion was given to it, right? The four-head leopard, because that's the kingdom out of which the Antichrist will rule. And then the Antichrist kingdom is the fourth beast, right? And again, we see that fourth beast in Revelation. And again, so we'll go over a lot of this again, but that fourth beast is a combination of, it's an amalgamation of all the other animals, of all the Russian bear, and the British lion and the leopard. It's a combination of them. And when it says that dominion was given to the leopard, I think that dominion is going to be worldwide. it's just not going to be quite the way we think. And to understand that, we're going to have to get into why I would argue that Islam the is where both Turkey and Islam is where the Antichrist is going to come out of, and that's the empire upon which he will build. But he'll have his entirely different thing going on. So we'll dive more into that. We're coming to the end of this, but yes. So like I said, none of this is anything anyone should be broken up about. It's just something we should be talking about, and we need to study it out ourselves. But we need to be open to new ideas, because a lot of people who have been writing are writing from older positions, right? And the thing is, we have to remember that so much of our prophecy teachers were, if you lived during the Cold War, I was born during the Cold War. If you're, like me, slightly older, you remember the fall of communism. But think about how many of our prophecy teachers were there, where it's like Russia and Cuba and the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it's like you wouldn't have thought of anything to do with about the Muslim Empire, right? Because as far as you were concerned, the Caliphate, how many people who lived in the United States post World War II, right, even remember that the Ottoman Empire was a thing? You say, well, most prophecy teachers say, oh, the last great empire was Rome, and I'm like, are you high? The Ottoman Empire, the Islamic Caliphate, controlled way more area than Rome ever dreamed of controlling, and it did it for longer. And yet, Rome's the last great world empire. What are you smoking? The Islamic Empire literally was North Africa, Saudi Arabia, all of the Middle East, up until basically it was like the Islamic Empire. Russia was up here, and here's India over here. There were times when the Islamic Caliphate went into France. Spain was for 700 years was the front lines. Like, it was like, okay, sometimes the Spanish would control, and sometimes the Ottomans would control. It went back and forth. Like a third of the Spanish words have Arabic origins, right? We all grew up during the time of Russia. Russia. No, hold on. We didn't grow up during, most of us never lived during a time when the Ottoman Caliphate was a thing, much less a threat. But it has. The Ottoman Caliphate controlled way more territory. So my only point here is, and again, when we talk about the Roman Empire, if I say, okay, Roman Empire, where was it seated? You'd say Rome. Most people would say Rome. But you know what the longest serving capital of the Roman Empire was? Byzantium, also known as Constantinople, now Istanbul. Istanbul was the capital of the Caliphate, of the Ottoman Empire, from like the 1450s until World War I. It's over 1,000 years. Before that, it was the seat for the Holy Roman Empire, and before that, the normal Roman Empire, because it was from the 1450s to 350 AD. Rome served as the capital of the Roman Empire for only about 400 years. Because remember, the Roman Empire started with Julius Caesar. It's like 50 years before Jesus even came. Then in 350 AD, Constantine's like, I'm going to move the center because this empire is getting too big for me to rule from Italy. So we're going to move to where? Turkey. He moves it to Byzantium. Now people are like, oh, that's the Byzantine Empire. It's not really Roman. They call themselves the Roman Empire. It was a Roman emperor who moved it. Yeah, it's still the Roman Empire, right? Just moving the capital doesn't change. It may change us how we look at it in history, but it doesn't mean that it's a different empire. It's the same empire. And Rome doesn't fall until 1450, or until like the 1450s. I think it's 1453. Maybe it's 7. I can't remember off the top of my head. But my point being, the longest serving capital of Rome was in Turkey, but we never think about that because it's our perspective, right? We come from a European background, so it's like, well, Rome's in Europe, and that's important. So I'm going to stop right there. I love all of y'all. This was a great conversation. I love the fact that y'all are talking. You're asking questions. You're talking to one another. I love that. So let's keep this going. Sunday, we're going to talk about the gap theory and old Earth, and probably a few other things, just to kind of wrap up that this idea of cosmology, where I kind of want to explore all the different concepts, right? And then the Sundays are going to be a lot more free form. We're going to switch topics from here to there, but like I said, we moving forward, we're working on, or I'm working on, a sort of a mission statement to help keep us centered. But also, I don't want anyone to think that this can't be all there is, right? For you, don't allow, if you have the ability to go to people, like I said, if you have a church, please keep going to your church. If your church is falling into error or there's whatever, then do leave. But what I'm saying is, even if you've left a church, if you don't feel comfortable in church, or then do something with, meet people, have them in your home. We need, we need to be doing this together, right? We need to love one another here, but don't allow the internet to replace real human beings. We can't. We need to know our neighbors. We need to love our neighbors in the communities that we're in. I'm honestly taking this very much to heart. I have some announcements a little further down the line. I want to make certain some things happen first. But we can't allow this to replace real human contact. Let's get to know our neighbors. Let's get to be the voice of Jesus to the communities in which we live and we serve. It's too easy to pick and choose our communities because we can drive everywhere, right? I live in Waxahachie. The church I've been attending is in DeSoto. That's 30 minutes away. Well, the church is 30 minutes away because you have to cut through the city, but whatever. My point being is, that's not my community. I live in a very different city. I need to be a voice in this community. Wherever you are, you need to be a voice in that community. So let's love one another here, and let's love those around us, right? Let's love the people that God has brought to us. Let's be his voice and his truth in a world that really needs it way more now than it ever has before. All right? I'll see y'all on Sunday.